operations of this committee. You are greeted this morning as I welcome all members on the platform and all other participants. I will, honorable members, without taking further time, just deal with the formalities for the meeting, starting with the rules of engagement on this platform. Honorable members, you are reminded that at all times, members should keep their mics muted and video camera off until you are recognized by the chairperson at the time to want to speak. At that point, you then unmute your mic, switch on your video camera. In situations where you experience network challenges, you would indicate to the chairperson for permission to switch the video camera off so as to maximize the bandwidth, and we can then proceed from that point. So this would also apply to all other participants who may have an opportunity to speak on the platform. It's also important to remind ourselves that as we probably get disconnected and connect, that we ensure that that happens. When that happens, we reconnect with our mics muted and video camera off, as mics are sensitive and could pick up background sounds as you join the meeting, which can distract the speaker that may be on the platform at the time. In terms of point of orders, members are allowed to raise point of orders. However, you would not unmute your mic to raise a point of order until the chairperson has recognized you. In this case, you would raise the point of order on which the chairperson can rule upon. So if we do that, honorable members, that should keep our meeting flowing, and that will be able to hear each other without unnecessary distractions. So let's just make sure from now on that we implement the rules, that you keep your mic muted and the video camera off until you are recognized to speak. Of course, ICT would have to assist in a case where members will struggle to mute the mic or to unmute in that score so as to ensure participation. The hands, as you would know, honorable members, are raised on the platform. But if you are struggling with this hand, you will indicate either on the chat or at least indicate to the chairperson for you to be noted to speak. That would help. So, Honorable Kola Barnett, I'm sure there may be a problem with your mic. It's been on for some time now.
Apologies.
Yes, so I'm just making sure that it's not the gadget that is playing differently, and that at the time you need to speak, you can't. So with that having been cleared, honorable members, as a way of opening this meeting, I will then go to apologies or leave of absence that may have been received by committee support, for those to be recorded formally.
Good morning, Chairperson. We just have an apology for Dr. Basopo, who will leave the meeting at 10 o'clock this morning. And then also our parliamentary legal advisor, Ms. Gangan, she has 2 other committee meetings that she's attending at the moment. She will be in and out of our meeting, and if there's anything urgent we need, we can contact her. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ajara. That's the apology received. I'll just check if maybe other members to have apologies received. I know Honorable Becker was to join later, in the meeting or may not, given her ill health.
Excuse me, Chairperson, apologies. I've just received a notice that Ms. Kubeka will not attend. She's not well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that having been said, honorable members, so those are the apologies we have. But we do have a quorum to proceed with the meeting. That having been said, we would now, without waste of time, as I said, look at the agenda. Honorable members would be aware that we have started our public hearing last week, where we had presentations from civil society. And today we would be having a presentation in response to those matters that would have been raised. As already stated, we have got also the state law advisor on the platform, represented by Miss, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, Haricharan, who is on the platform, who also works closely with the legal Department of Parliament. So I'm putting this point in case at any given time there may be a matter to be clarified on their side, that would be such an opportunity if there's a need, or if any of the questions from members may need their response in that regard, that they can clarify any matter at any given time. Otherwise, they've been playing the role of listening to all presentations, so that at the end, when the bill itself can pass the legal test in that regard. So I just thought I should mention that she's present. As I said, would then, that's the agenda we have. We'll deal with that part of the public hearing and then get to the next items, which is that of the portfolio committee. Then we'll take up other matters at that point. On what point are you raising, Honorable Kolabanet?
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Kolabanet?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to raise the fact that we only actually received these 6 extra rather substantial documents at 6:20 last night for consideration today. I don't know, presumably the department felt that we must spend the night, stay up the night examining these documents. I really feel this is not treating this committee with the way it should be. It's just not good enough. It makes it look like we must just sit here, listen to what they say, and virtually rubber stamp it, because these documents should be workshopped, looked through, taken to colleagues in the business, get informed commentary on this input. And instead it's sent to us. I mean, after a 15 or 16 hour day yesterday, then we're supposed to look through this. I'm very concerned that that this is acceptable to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Honorable Kolabanet. I'm sure the department would also speak to that. Your concern genuine and taken, and I'm sure they'll be able to explain that. We have raised, I think, from the office side that aspect, but I'm sure they'll be able to respond as they present, and would want in that score allow the minister to lead that discussion. And Honorable Minister, we do know that the department themselves listened to quite a number of presentations. We're allowing 30 minutes per presentation, 120 or 150 minutes. So you try and do your presentation, of course, with your political overview, 5 minutes or so, and the presentation at 40 minutes to allow yourselves to take us to the points as they have been raised by different stakeholders, including the proposals you are making, mitigating on those. So we'll be guided then by yourself on how you would utilize that 45 minutes or so to deal with the presentation on item 1. Item 2, as I said, we'll take it later as a separate item. Immediately after your presentation will allow members to engage with your presentation and then have an opportunity to respond before we conclude on that item. Like I said, you'll also have an opportunity to clarify that concern that has been raised by members, which from the committee support side would have raised with the department yesterday. Thank you, Honorable Minister. I hope you can still hear and that this is an opportunity for you to speak to the committee. Oh, there you are. So you can proceed. Please, welcome. Thank
you. Thank you, Chairperson. And good morning to members of the
I'm not sure if it's on my side.
Allow me to lead, but it's not due to our own.
I'm not sure if
can I be?
Am I
audible? Am I audible, Chairperson?
Better, but if you are experiencing that problem again, I would allow you to switch off the video camera. At least proceed, yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. I was expressing our apologies for sending the presentations at the time that we sent, but there are explanations to that. If members will recall that the public hearings were only held on Tuesday, and we needed to also make sure we tick all the boxes and make sure we sign off on things to this portfolio committee that are signed off, and we had to check with all the other stakeholders that are part of making sure or supporting us to make sure that the bill takes place. And but we express our apologies. We indicated to the committee support team yesterday that we needed to make sure that our documents and the submissions we are making here are accurate in terms of the contributions of other stakeholders as well. Second issue, Chair, though we're not going to deal with it now, we'll deal with it later. The CETA, on the CETA presentation in terms of the implementation of the PP report, the CETA took a decision to take the report 114 on review. So we also had to then get the legal advisors and agreements on whether we can table the 114 when the matter has been taken on review. And it's for that reason that we are not tabling 114 today. With CETA will only table 113. With that said, Chairperson, I really appreciate the public hearings that took place last week and the submissions that came from everybody. I think it's important to emphasize that all the parties that submitted for the public hearings and to Parliament, they are all supportive of the Postbank being established as a bank, and therefore they're supportive of the amendment of the Postbank Act to create a bank controlling company. And the other, they just needed clarity. And before handing over to the officials to give the details, there were a few issues that arose that I think I need to deal with. First, it was the issue of whether this committee is the relevant committee to deal with the bill. Indeed, Chairperson, this is the relevant committee to deal with the bill, the amendment bill, because it's an amendment bill. The initial bill was again dealt with by this very committee. It was not dealt with the Finance Committee because this is not a money bill. This is the structures bill, which deals with entities that report to this committee. And that's why this committee is dealing with this bill. The second issue that was dealt with by members of the portfolio committee was whether there's a need of the separation of the post office and the post bank. And I need to clarify the following. The post office and the post bank were separated by the Postbank Act of 2010, which act came into effect on the 1st of April of 2019. So as we are talking, the post bank and post office are separate entities. The post bank had to be registered with as a separate company, and it is duly registered as that. However, even when the Postbank Act was enacted and came into effect, the post office or SAPO remains the shareholder and owner of the Postbank. And when we started to apply for the corporatization or for the banking license of the Postbank, the National Treasury amended the Banking Act, which is the one that is used by the Prudential Authority and the Reserve Bank to determine who becomes a bank and who does not become a bank. The amendment was specific and categorical that only financially viable SOCs or state-owned companies or state-owned entities can then qualify to apply for a banking license, or they can then become the bank controlling company. Which means, given that the post office, problems are not new, its problems are well dated, the post office, because it's not financially viable, it cannot therefore become a bank controlling company, or it cannot apply, or a company owned by the post office cannot apply for the banking license. And that's why we are then bringing this amendment to transfer the ownership of the post bank to the post office, to the government, from the post bank, from the post office to the government, to allow the post bank to then start the process of applying for a banking license. And we then amend the related sections that dealt with the post office as the owner of the post bank. That is the clarity I need to provide, but that detail will come through when the presentation is made. The second issue that was raised was the issue around the powers of the minister, and to both appoint the board and also to appoint the CFO and the CEO. I need to make this categorically clear. When the post bank becomes a bank, and even now because we are working towards the bank, the post bank is subject to the Banking Act. So the minister, as the shareholder, like any other shareholder, will have a right to appoint a board. But that board is not appointed by a minister sitting and saying, who's my friend? Kola Barnett is my friend, I'm going to put her in the board. It's advertised, and the nominations committee is put in place that then goes through those who have applied and the recommendations made to the minister. After the recommendations have been made to the minister, before even the minister finally approves those names that have been recommended are sent to the Auditor General of South Africa to do an assessment of what is called fit and proper in terms of their own standards. When the AG is done, they give back the report to the minister to say, this is the report that we found, and the minister will then is required to take those names to the Prudential Authority, which is the Reserve Bank, to then assess the fit and proper of the Reserve Bank in line with their own requirements, and then approve or disapprove of person fit and proper to serve as members of the board of the Reserve Bank. With that, the minister does not have the sole power to decide who becomes in the board of the Post Bank. That is decided in conjunction with the approvals of the Auditor General, with the vetting of the Auditor General and the approval of the Prudential Authority, and then tabled to cabinet for concurrence. But somebody must take the responsibility, and that resides with the minister. So by so doing, we're saying there is sufficient checks and balances to make sure that there is no abuse of process, and there's no abuse and disregard of process to appoint members of the Post Bank board. Secondly, the issue of the accounting, the CEO and the CFO. They're appointed by the board with the concurrence of the minister. But again, even with those appointments, they're subjected to the fit and proper assessment of both the AG and also the Reserve Bank. again, is the checks and balances. And in terms of process, the minister cannot just say, I don't concur to the recommendations. She or he must concur to the names that are brought in by the board. She cannot plug in a person from outside the process that has been run by the board. The act is very clear. But again, the checks and balances of what is the Reserve Bank calls appointment of competent authority, the final decision resides with the Reserve Bank, who will say yes or no. And this applies to any other bank. And I think, Chairperson, for me, those are the issues that needed my direct clarity. I'll then invite Mr. Shilembe, who's the Deputy Director General responsible for entity oversight, to then take us through the presentations, taking members through what has been adjusted and also the clarifications on the other questions that have come through. Thank you, Chairperson.
Mr. Shilembe.
Good morning, Chairperson, and thank you very much. And good morning also to the honorable members. Good morning to the Minister, good morning to the Deputy Minister, and good morning to all the colleagues on this platform. I am going to take the committee through the presentation, whose outline is as follows. We will first deal with the purpose of the presentation, which is essentially to present the department's responses to the comments received by the Portfolio Committee on Communications on the Postbank Amendment Bill, which were presented to the Portfolio Committee on 25 October 2022. Let's just go back to the previous slide, which shows the outline, please. Thank you. Then I will give a little bit of the background as to where does this come from, and then we'll do the objectives of the amendment bill, the role of the controlling company, and then we'll do the actual responses to the actual comments received. And then finally, there was a request that we take the committee through the socio-economic impact assessment system, the SABC, so which we will touch on in the last slide, and then we will conclude. Thank you very much. Next slide. Next one. Thank you. So the background is as follows. Let's go to the background. Thank you. The background is as follows. The post office and the Postbank were already separated, as the minister has indicated, by the Postbank Act number 9 of 2010, which provided for the separation of the Postbank, which was then a division of SAPO, into a standalone company. Then the Minister of Communications gazetted and determined the effective date for this separation of assets and liabilities of the two companies as the 1st of April 2019. However, in spite of these having been separated, the post office remained the sole owner and shareholder of the Postbank, that is, in terms of the Postbank Act. This meant that in registering and applying for the license for the bank, the post office will be the bank controlling company of that bank. However, as the minister has again indicated, the Banks Act, when it was amended, imposed a requirement that only financially viable SOCs can apply for a license to be a bank or a bank controlling company. Therefore, after the amendment of the Banks Act by National Treasurer, there was a need to amend the Postbank Act to remove the post office as a bank controlling a company. Next slide. So what are the objectives exactly of this amendment bill? Mainly, we are proposing the amendment to the Act in order to comply with the requirements of the Banks Act, which requires that only viable SOEs can apply for a banking license or to become a bank controlling company. And we are thus proposing the removal of SAPO as the sole owner and shareholder of the Postbank. Specifically, we are proposing the amendment or to amend the shareholding arrangements for Postbank, transferring shareholding from South African Post Office to government through the creation of a new bank controlling company. We are also proposing the facilitation of the establishment and registration of the bank controlling company in terms of the Banks Act, and to provide for matters connected therewith. The Ministry of Communications and Digital Technologies as the shareholder department to be responsible directly for the Postbank as a standalone on behalf of the government. This to be effected by establishing the BCC between Postbank and the department in the reporting structure. To amend other sections of the Act impacted by the change in the Postbank reporting structure. And upon the enactment of the Postbank Amendment Bill, the BCC for Postbank will be registered in terms of Section 43 of the Banks Act to exercise control over the Postbank. This is in line with the license application. That will then conclude the Postbank license application process. But what is the role of the bank controlling company? The bank controlling company, the BCC as we use it for short, is required to be registered in terms of Section 43 of the Banks Act to exercise control over the bank or over the Postbank in this case. It becomes the shareholder of reference for capital adequacy and in terms of compliance and submission of statutory monthly returns as stipulated in the Banks Act, regulations and circular. Essentially, this means that whenever the capital is not adequate in the bank, the Prudential Authority would look at the bank controlling company to make up that capital, such that capital adequacy requirements are compliant with. The implication is that the BCC will step in to recapitalize and support its subsidiary bank if it runs into financial difficulties. One of the key requirements is that the BCC must be in a financially sound position in terms of Section 44(2)(e) of the Banks Act. Unfortunately, as the Minister again has articulated this point, SAPO is not in a financially sound position at this moment to meet the requirements for registration as a BCC. There are also very high capital adequacy requirements if SAPO were to be the direct shareholder of the Postbank. This is also because SAPO's non-banking services posed a threat to safeguarding of depositors' funds, in that government will be obliged to provide ongoing financial support to SAPO in order to maintain BCC structure position. Next slide. So we then move on to the comments which were made by various parties. The following institutions made the submission to the Portfolio Committee last week: the Right to Know, Financial Sector Conduct Authority, Congress of South African Trade Unions, the Banking Association of South Africa, and Ombudsman for Banking Services South Africa. We noted that although the above organizations made comments in their submission, they all are in support of the Postbank Amendment Bill in recognition of the need or needs to expand financial inclusion and competition in the banking industry, but also the need to provide accessible and affordable banking services to the poor and marginalized. There were, however, specific comments which we needed to look closely into and respond as to whether we agree or not agree with those. One of those was the need to define financial services in line with the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, number 37 of 2002. Section 2F, the proposal is welcome, as we have considered it for the definition in the bill to be expanded to incorporate the definition in the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act number 37 of 2002. In other words, we have accepted and recommend to the committee that this definition be inserted in the amendment. There was also a proposal that section 2F, let's go back, that section 2F needs to be revised with the insertion of the word responsible, so as to read as follows: ensuring responsible land, rural and lower income markets. Again, we have considered this and accepted this proposal and found it to be acceptable, and therefore it's supported. Section 9.1, Roman figure 1, there's the suggestion to rephrase the section to read as follows: lend money in accordance with lending policy made by the minister, with the concurrence of the Minister of Finance, read with the applicable clauses of the National Credit Act, Code of Banking Practice, and the Conduct of Financial Institutions. Again, the suggestion is welcome. In our view, it enhances the description to be also aligned with other relevant legislation. Next slide, please. Then there was a comment about the powers and approval by the minister to appoint the Postbank board members, the CEO and the CFO, and the concurrence of the Minister of Finance in the board appointment. Here, the perception is that the minister is given too much power. The minister went at length to explain how rigorous the process of appointing the board and the executives of a bank are. So we are saying both the board and executive recruitment and appointment processes follow a transparent and rigorous appointment involving different role players throughout as per government legislation. We quote here section 10, 14, and 18 of the Postbank Act and section 13, 2 FA G of the Banks Act. We're saying there is a clear separation of duties in terms of the roles from the initial shortlisting up to the fit and proper assessment processes, which are conducted by independent auditors, the AG, and the Prudential Authority in terms of the Banks Act. The proposal here was that a selection committee be put in place to deal with the application process or the nomination process for board members. In actual fact, there is indeed in section 14 of the Postbank Act, we call it there the nominations committee, but it serves exactly the same purpose as the selection committee that was proposed at the last hearing. That selection committee or nomination committee first screens the nominations and makes recommendation to the minister. And then only the recommended candidates are taken forward to the AG for fit and proper assessment. And once the AG has performed the fit and proper assessment, those who qualify then go to the Prudential Authority for the final fit and proper assessment. Only after then is the minister and the Minister of Finance supposed to concur to the names of the proposed candidates. Then there was a comment also on the composition of the board members of the bank controlling company. The view was to strengthen the oversight over the banks through the composition of the BCC. There is a proposal not to have more than 50% board members of the bank to also be board of the controlling company. The view is that this will enable the shareholder oversight, BCC, the ability to challenge the board of the bank. The 50-50% split proposal is supported to enhance governance and accountability in line with the banking industry practices. Then in this slide, we summarize the SEAS, which arose in the last hearing again as members requested to find out if some kind of due diligence was performed on this amendment to the bill. We summarize here the items of the SEAS which have to be complied with. I think as the members would have noted, it is quite a dense document, and it is first compiled by the department, submitted to DPME for assessment, and then only when the DPME is satisfied will they issue a certificate of compliance. So what does the SEAS do? First and foremost, it allows for the conceptual framework of defining the problem or the problem statement and the root causes of the problem. Once that is summarized, then it summarizes the objectives of the proposal and how that seeks to deal with the problem. It then assesses the contribution of the proposal to national priorities. There are actually 7 priorities, but we thought we'd just list 3 here for purposes of brevity. These, the ones that we mentioned, are economic transformation and job creation, education, skills and health, reliable and quality basic services. Once those have been assessed, or once the proposal has been assessed against the national priorities, then the SEAS explores the other options which are potentially available to deal with the same problem. So the options analysis section then present several options which are theoretically available to deal with the problem and try to identify the best possible solution, if not the proposal that is already on the table. Once that has been done, there is a section that then looks at the impact assessment of the option chosen. What is the impact on various groups and stakeholders? Those stakeholders need to be consulted, and we need to demonstrate that the stakeholders have been consulted and they are in support, or their concerns have been taken into account of this proposal. After that, the costs and benefits analysis relative to each group are presented and analyzed. Each cost is supposed to be met by the benefits and how those costs are to be managed to the lowest minimum, whilst enhancing the benefits to the highest level possible. Then there is a risk section which shows how risk is managed, mitigated, and dealt with in the proposal. And finally, there is a monitoring and evaluation plan in the proposal, which says this is how this proposal will be monitored and evaluated over a period of time. Having presented this document to the DPME, DPME issued a certificate to say the bill covered satisfactorily all the critical elements required for the SEAS. Next slide. So in conclusion, the department appreciates the comments and proposals from the above organizations, which are aimed at strengthening the Postbank Amendment Bill. We are also thankful to the committee for affording the opportunity to respond to the comments and proposals from the organization. We are pleased that all the organizations supported the finalization of the Postbank Amendment Bill. We are also saying it is also worth noting that to manage the interdependent relationship between SAPO and Postbank, the two entities are required by legislation to enter into memoranda of association and service level agreement, just as to regulate their relationship. With those words, Chairperson, I thank you very much. I think this is the last slide. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Shelembe. I was speaking to myself. Thank you, Mr. Shelembe, for the presentation. Honorable members, we have now received the presentation. We would be taking hands from those members who would want to engage. Like I indicated earlier, we also have received apologies for those members who would want to leave earlier because of other engagements. I'm not sure if the Honorable Dr. Baswop is still on the platform or not. But can I then now recognize hands of those members who would want to speak? Honorable Bodlani, you will be the first, followed by Honorable Kolabana. I'm noting those that hands are up, and then I'll come back to the other members. Honorable Bodlani.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Good morning to everybody in the meeting. And we are thankful for the presentation that we have just had. I think it is welcomed. Chairperson, when we were dealing with the public participation last week, there was no indication that the environmental impact assessment had been done. What was the reason for that omission, especially because the official stamp is just silent in terms of the document, in terms of that having been done? And the more you listen to the issue of the post office, yesterday I was at the Postbank post office. There was literally one person manning post office, and we are at a point where we are talking about having post banks with and using the structure of the post offices. Those are the sort of things that should really have error.
It's unless it's on my side, Honorable Bodlani. You are frozen on my side and I can't hear you. Or is it me, Honorable members?
No, she's frozen, Chair.
It was frozen, Chair. It seems to be coming right.
All right, Honorable Bodlani, can you now hear? It doesn't seem like. Honorable Kolabana, if you do not mind, we'll take you. We'll still get back to Honorable Bodlani, probably by the time you complete, maybe it should be sorted. Honorable Kolabana, can you hear me?
Chairperson, I think Ms. Barnard's mic is off.
Apologies, Chair. I've had to change to a different laptop. If you won't mind, my seems to be unstable. If I may leave my camera off, I think that may assist.
Yes, but we can hear you. Yes.
That's good. All right.
Yes, I was just indicating that you proceed in the meantime. Probably Honorable Bodlani would be able to get back.
Indeed. I know there are massive connection issues everywhere. If I can just start then, when it says on page 4 of the impact assessment document that the option selected was considered to be the most viable and cost-effective to mitigate against the risk that government would be obliged to provide ongoing support to the South African Post Office in order to maintain the structure of the South African Post Office as a result of the ownership of Postbank. What ongoing support are we talking about here? Are we talking about support to the post office, which of course is now subject to a Hawks investigation for what looks like massive fraud? What involvement would the government have here? And should the legislation go ahead and the Postbank be separated completely from the South African Post Office? I don't see how it would not then fall under the Finance Committee because of the separation from the Post Office per se, which falls under this committee. It just is extremely bizarre to me that this Communications Committee looks to be overseeing a bank. A very bizarre concept, because of course there's zero financial expertise in this committee that I'm actually aware of. I'm curious, just as an aside, this document that's come to us has so many errors in it, all underlined in blue. Was that because of the time constraints? Because I'm failing to see why we're rushing this through at the rate we seem to be doing. This is how errors are made. Now, it seems on page 17 that the Post Office is vehemently against this proposal. And one understands, I mean, it's going to hit them financially in a massive way. And have they, I'm not sure if they have any legal means to fight this. Is that what we're looking for? A means to, you know, a possible fight back by the Post Office. I think that's something we would need a legal opinion on. And if you could tell me where to find the proposed budget for the creation of this Postbank. I saw reference to part of it possibly in the annual report for the department, not sure, so please advise me there. In slide 5, it says the implication is it will step in to recapitalize and support its subsidiary bank if it runs into financial difficulties. That's the Department of Communications. Now that actually means that taxpayers will have to bail it out if it fails. Now we're all very aware of the mass looting that happened at the VBS, and the confidence is the issue here. There's little confidence that there won't be a repeat. But this time the taxpayers will have to pay for the bad debts, not just the weeping pensioners who are sitting outside the banks hoping to get a bit of their money that they've saved all those years. So that is the reality of what's being faced, is that lack of confidence, obviously. In slide 8, there is a provision for the board members to be interviewed. Is there a provision for the board members to be interviewed by this committee and voted for in the National Assembly? Now, I haven't seen that. It's no different to my eye to appointing members of the SABC board, all of whom were interviewed by us. And I believe that it's of such import that it should come through this committee. And I'm not saying there should not be expert financial people on the panel, because suggesting that this committee is not qualified is exactly what I've been saying all along, that there's no financial expertise here that I know of. But on the other hand, if it is of such import, then surely that board should be again selected by this committee alongside financial experts, perhaps the Committee on Finance, of course, which we apparently are going to meet to discuss this matter, and others. And if it's not in there, then who took that decision? Because I think it would be relevant. Thank you so much, Chair. I'm done. Chair.
May I check, Honorable Podlani? Are you able
Chairperson,
to? Yes.
I don't know what happened. The system kicked me out, Chairperson. If you allow me.
You were on a point on SASA.
Yes, Chairperson.
Yes, but from there, I couldn't hear from that point.
Well,
So,
Chairperson, I was trying to get clarity on how we got DPME to provide the social economic impact assessment, considering this is government assessing itself on whether this is a viable entity or not. I'm really worried. What is the possibility of getting an independent assessment, Chairperson? And Chairperson, we spoke about Postbank providing goodwill to the post office. Is the minister able to elaborate on that? Because the post office executive was very clear, the Postbank, I beg your pardon, post office, yes, sorry, was very clear about the impact that the separation of the entity is going to have on the post office. So, and there was an issue, I'm terming it as it was, to say it was going to be some goodwill. Where do we stand on that? And Chairperson, on the selection of the board, when the minister talks about the selection committee, is she referring to this committee, just so that we are clarified? If she is not referring to this committee, how is the selection of that selection committee going to be made? And just to go back to the point, Chairperson, the bill was very silent on the economic assessment as well as on the selection of the board. Maybe those are the sort of things that should then be properly implied in the bill, so that we do not come here and ask questions that we could have just read in the actual amendment bill. Thank you, Chairperson.
thank you, Honorable Bodlani. I think before I see you, Honorable Minister, I do understand Honorable Gumbo has just sent me the message that whilst he's connected, he's still struggling, and I'll get back to him later if he still wants to ask the questions. So for now, I'll allow you to respond to those that have been put forward thus far. Honorable Minister, so your hand was up.
Thank you, Chairperson. I raised my hand because I'll need to be excused, but there are issues that I think must be addressed by me because officials may find it difficult to respond to. I think Honorable Botlane and Honorable Kolabanat are reading the SASA wrongly. The SASA, first, there is a system in government that is established when you put policies and bills, and that assessment is done by the DPME. We cannot change rules and processes of government because we want to deal with this one. So in terms of requirement, and it has been standard with all the bills, with everything, whether it's the Bank Act, whatever, it has been assessed by the DPME on SASA. So those are the rules. So we stick to those. Secondly, the selection committee referred to is not the selection committee, is the committee that is appointed of experts. The portfolio committee oversees the appointment of the SABC because of independence. There is a government. A government must be allowed to govern, and the parliament will hold government to account. And the parliament, they cannot be attempts from the DA to want to take the powers of the executive to govern. It cannot be. We've said to this committee, and it's in the board, it's in the act, they are strict and clear checks and balances to make sure that no single minister individual can then run amok with the bank. And that includes the Auditor General of South Africa, that includes the Reserve Bank as independent institutions themselves. So we cannot be saying because it's important, it must come to the portfolio committee. No, government has to govern, and you must hold us accountable for governing. And we cannot change the rules because of you want to undermine this government. Then you refer to government.
Point of order, Chairperson.
What is the point of order, Honorable Podlani?
Chairperson, when we come to these portfolio committees, we are clear that we put party politics aside. The minister is taking us there, and that is not where we want to go. We are in these committees as members of parliament, and she must just please remember that and not refer to the political parties. We are speaking on behalf of South Africans.
I'm sure the Honorable Minister will be able to continue from that point, taking into account that we do not emphasize that point about parties, but she should still clarify the matters that she would want to clarify.
My hand is up,
Honorable
Chair.
Paula Barnett.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just like to point out that a lot of accusations have been made that were never said. We're asking questions, which I think many people are asking, and it's our job to ask them here. I have at no stage attempted to undermine the government or attack anybody. I'm not speaking specifically as a DA person. I am speaking as a member of this committee. So I would ask that I'm not dressed down like a child by this minister. I would ask that she simply answers my questions. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, please proceed to respond to the points raised.
As I proceed, Chairperson, if the members had read the SIA's report properly, SIA's report evaluates a process of saying the recommendation you are making, for instance, the establishment of the bank controlling company, is the best alternative. And the SIA says it is the best alternative because if it is not, if the post office is left as the bank controlling company, government will have to step in. Government will only step in if the post office is a bank controlling company, because post office is not financially viable. So government will have to step in to make the post office financially viable. So to remove the requirement of the post office of government stepping in and the pensioners and the taxpayers stepping in, then they were establishing a bank controlling company, which is not the post office, which then the bank controlling company will have its own reserves. The bank controlling company is not the Department of Communications. The bank controlling company is indicated there in the bill that says it's going to be constituted by 50% members of the board of the Postbank, and the bank controlling company will be registered independent. It doesn't say the department will be. It says the government will be the shareholder represented by the minister. But it's the government, the shareholder and the bank controlling company are two different things. We are establishing here a bank controlling company which is independent of the department, which is constituted by 50% of the board members of the Postbank. And that bank controlling company will then have its reserves in line with the Banking Act requirement. That will once in a while we have to intervene or take decisions to make sure that the bank remains within the liquidity requirements of the bank, because that is their duty, and they will be experts in that issue. And then there was an issue of whether the post office will take us to court and whatever. The post office is not going to take anybody to court on this. And the issue of goodwill, we have been assisting the post office and saying, what do they need to do? Because there are limitations in terms of what the Postbank can do for the post office, because the Postbank is still governed by the liquidity requirement, is governed by exposure requirement. Currently, the Postbank has a high exposure level to the post office, which is not good for a bank, and therefore the Postbank must be protected from that. The sustainability of the post office is what we have requested to say, can we get assistance from the National Treasury, from the National Fiscus, to assist the post office as they rebuild themselves in terms of the document, the positioning plan, the repositioning plan we brought here, the post office of tomorrow that we brought here, that they're on course to implement. And I think what the other thing that I need to clarify is the issue of saying this thing is so serious. It's only Parliament that can deal with it. This thing is so serious, it's government that must deal with it and be held accountable by Parliament. The bank, the board of the Postbank must be appointed by the government and the minister with the checks and balances of the approval of the Reserve Bank. And because when you bring it to Parliament, you're going to have an issue of saying the Parliament decisions are going to be vetoed by the Reserve Bank, because that's the net effect of what happens. And therefore, do you want to subject Parliament to be vetoed by the Reserve Bank? People say, no, what you have appointed is not correct. The last issue is the issue of the location of the reporting of the bank. What we are dealing with, members, is the bill that creates a structure called the Bank Controlling Company. When the Postbank is established at the bank, Parliament would decide on its own without us, where should the Postbank report to? If this is the committee, or is the finance committee that the bank must report to? But it's not an issue at play now. The issue at play is the creation of the Bank Controlling Company. The issue at play is not where this bank reports to. It's the creation of a Bank Controlling Company so that we can then go and apply for a bank license so that the Postbank can then become a fully fledged bank that can transact like any other bank. When that bank is established fully fledged, because currently it's not a fully fledged bank, when it's established fully fledged, the Parliament will have at its disposal every right to discuss which one is the best committee to report to. And when we don't, we'll be informed accordingly at that right time. Thank you, Chairperson. I think if I see Honorable Gumbo has raised his hand, but I'll request to be excused so that I can then go and join the Summit on Gender-Based Violence, which I need to account on the work of the department on that part, and then the officials, and they will remain responding to the details of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Gumbo, I would give him the opportunity as I indicated, so that when officials are responding, or the Deputy Minister, if he will also be making responses, his point would also be been taken care of. Honorable Gumbo, can you hear now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Chair, now. I think now I'm fine. Thank you, Chair, and greetings to everyone in the meeting. The presentation of the Minister and the department is welcomed with a deep sense of appreciation, as it clarifies some of the questions and comments made previously. Chairperson, as already heard last week, there is support from organizations representing different interests for the Post-Bank Amendment Bill with some minor amendments. We would want to see the bill finalized, taking into account different inputs made, not only because the state bank establishment is a long-standing resolution of the ANC, but because it is a necessary intervention to help the low-income and rural poor to access banking service closer to their living spaces, as the Post Bank will use the post office infrastructure. Chairperson, however, the issue of funding the post office is more urgent. Is more urgent than ever before if the Post Bank is to succeed. I think that would be my contribution, Chairperson, and we fully support the bill.
Thank you, Honorable Gumbo. I take it that from those members who would have not asked questions, if you still want to ask the question, you can raise your hand so that we allow the responses also for those questions and comments that have been made already.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand, but if you allow that, I can steal this moment. Has the Minister left, if I may ask?
Please proceed, Honorable Pambo. No, as you can see, she's still on the platform.
No, thanks, Chair. Look, I saw the comments by the Minister in response to the previous meeting, and partly she makes the point that the post-bank bill that we're dealing with here is not necessarily something we need, as it appears, and in how she responds to the question that was put to her, that there was never a need for this bill for us to have a fully fledged Postbank, because in her response, there is an admittance that SAPO is not financially, viable, and they're taking this route. But equally, essentially, what this will do is that it will just separate SAPO through the law when it's not necessary. The SAPO has the powers, or rather, this bank can be fully fledged within SAPO. We can just make sure that SAPO is in a proper financial, position. That is what is needed from this department. The separation of Postbank still does not make sense. It's not justifiable through this bill. And I don't think that the minister is responding to that. I, to an extent, may be sympathetic that perhaps the department has not thought through this. Because if you hear the minister, especially on the part of ownership, she says that the parliament will decide. Which parliament will decide? Who are we? Are we not members of parliament? As people who are in this committee, as members of this committee, surely we should be discussing, that detail now, and that she should be proposing that. But to say there's a bill here and we think that parliament will decide, what is her idea? What is the department idea of this whole process? Because she says to us, no, parliament will decide. What does that even mean? Because we are here, we're sitting here precisely for that reason, to understand what does this bank look like? What do they want us to have out of this bank that we can't have through a process outside of this bill? And this is essentially what we raised last time, that the law is no longer the issue here. This bank can be owned by the state and be fully fledged within SAPO as the controlling company. And to separate it, why? Why do you need this bill? And this is not responded to by the minister, unless she spoke differently, but this is not responded to. No, thanks, John.
Thank you, Honorable Pambo. In fact, I sympathize with you because you said you joined, and you may have not heard this point even previously. But the minister has not left. I'm sure she would come back to this points. But just for us to understand that we are not debating the separation of the Postbank from SAPO, because that has already happened long before we came in as the sixth parliament. It's important to always be clarified on that. I think the point is the structure that needs to be put in and who gets to be the controlling company. And that's why there's a referral to SAPO from time to time, not from a point of whether the Postbank should be separated from SAPO or not. So I'm raising this. It's a debate we had when we came in as the committee, because we ourselves didn't believe in it. Right? Yes,
I think perhaps this is a continuation, Chair. Maybe here there is a problem of use of words, but the controlling company was what we were discussing. And
yes, that's why I'm saying let's discuss the controlling company.
And when we speak to separation in this case, that is the extreme of it. But in the realist sense of the word is that why would you not have SAPO as a controlling company?
Yes, and I think that's the point we are discussing now. So I would want the minister to speak to it, but more not on the point that we are back to April implementation in 2019. Honorable the Minister, if you are still here, if you want to respond, or Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll respond and then leave. Chairperson, like you've clarified.
Sorry, Minister, because I don't want anybody to speak and refer to you after you've spoken. Honorable Bodlani.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I would just like to emphasize as the minister comes in, my understanding that the bank controlling company is the government. I got a bit confused with her explanation, but this is my understanding, that the government will be the bank controlling company, whichever way we look at it, which simply means that if it's not even a question of if, Chairperson, when the bank is going to need a bailout, it is the government that is going to help to bail out. And Chairperson, Honorable Gumbu makes a point that this is a resolution of the governing party. And I would love for the minister to really further explain how the ruling party sees the funding of this entity. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Bodlani, I usually would not call you to order. You've just complained about...
Chairperson, you didn't reprimand the minister. So
No, Honorable Bodlani, I did, but not in the way you would have expected me to. I said it that don't get back to emphasize parties, but please respond to the questions that have been asked. And the minister agreed to proceed in that way. So please, if you want us to get back to that, then that's gonna be a problem. But your point has been made that the minister will clarify the part about government and the bailouts that may be required at the end. So minister, respond, and of course we'll release you. You've asked to leave. Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to provide clarity, the issue, the Honorable Botlani will be clarified by the acting CEO of the Postbank in terms of how the bank controlling company works, so that she doesn't think the bank controlling company is the Department of Government. It is not. It's going to be registered on its own, and the CEO will explain that. Honorable Pambo, the Postbank and Post Office have been separated. Postbank, it's a legal entity on its own, it's registered as a company. The bank controlling company, you must make it, the decision is, we are creating a bank controlling company because the Banks Act says no SOC or SOE can own or apply for a banking license when it's not financially viable. That is one. The Postbank today cannot apply if the owner of the Postbank, its post office, the Postbank cannot apply for the banking license. That's the first part. Secondly, we've come to this portfolio committee and said, at a minimum, the turnaround of the post office will take us another 3 years. And we're not expecting that the post office will be financially viable. Then we said it's going to be breaking even at that point in the 3 years, because you had said to us as members of the portfolio committee, link us to what we'll achieve by the end of the term of office of this parliament. And we said, we are going to make sure that the post office at that point is going to be breaking even, so that it doesn't have to rely on bailouts and any other thing. So it means for the period, then you decide that you don't want the change, which everybody says we must change. The commentary from the citizens came and say, change, we support this amendment, improve here, improve there on this amendment. It will mean we'll have to wait for them. But when you wait for them, it will mean the people who are earning pensions, the people who are getting grants, the people who have bank accounts in the post office, in the Postbank today, because the Postbank cannot transact as a bank. It will mean then you must remove all those who have bank accounts at the Postbank and move them to commercial banks. It will mean that the people who are earning grants cannot then, and those who cannot have access to bank accounts cannot open bank accounts in the Postbank. That's the net effect of delaying the creation of the bank controlling company, which is not a post office. And I don't think, Honorable Pambo, you'd want to make sure that our people suffer when we have an alternative of creating a bank controlling company that is independent of the post office, and make the Postbank to start to do its mandate of extending banking to the poor, underserved, and financially excluded. That's not what you would support, Honorable Pam. So that's why we need to get the amendment of the bank controlling company to come through. The clarity in terms of the bank controlling company, it has been explained, but I've asked the interim CEO of the Postbank to then deal with the details, the technical detail of that, in terms of how does the bank controlling company work vis-a-vis the bank board, the bank itself, and vis-a-vis the shareholder. The shareholder is not anywhere in that space. If the bank controlling company must come in and do stuff, and I'm doing that so that members can have the clarity. And Honorable Pambo, I didn't say Parliament must decide later. I'm saying what we are dealing with is the bank controlling company, which is the amendment bill that we are proposing that amend amend the act to create a bank controlling company. When the bank has applied for a license and been granted a license and qualified and been granted a license by the Reserve Bank, the Parliament is at liberty to decide, because there was a question by Honorable Kolabana to say, where does this bank report to? Because we don't have, this portfolio committee does not have the financial expertise. And I'm saying, that's not my call. That's beyond, that's above my pay grade. The Parliament will decide which is the best committee to oversee the bank. If it's this committee and they need to bring people with financial expertise in this committee, we are free. If they said it must go to the finance committee, we are free to go there. We don't, it's not my call. I have no say on where Parliament decide a certain entity of government reports to. I simply comply when I'm told you report here, I will comply to report there, and the department will do the same. With that, Chair, I can hand over to starting by Mr. Shilembe, and then moving to then Mr. Lucas Ndala, the interim CEO of the Postbank, to explain the technicalities, because I think now people want to know the technicalities of how the bank controlling company works, and I think it's only bankers who will know that part. Thanks.
Mr. Shilembe.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe the question that I need to clarify is the one which says, why is this bill silent on the election committee or the nominations committee? The nominations committee is already provided for in the main act, which we are amending. And that section is not up for amendment. Therefore, it still remains intact in the act. It is provided for in the main act, and we are not changing that part. That is why the amendment does not talk to it. There was also another question that why didn't we say last week that the SIAS had been performed? I think the minister articulated that one, that SIAS is part of the government system. It's actually a prerequisite. No bill comes to Parliament unless it has gone or undergone the SIAS route to be certified as compliant in terms of its impact. So we had presented even earlier when we introduced this bill to Parliament that SIAS had been undertaken for the bill. I think I've captured some of the questions. I'm going to leave then the BCC item to the interim CEO of the Postbank. Chair, thank you.
Good morning, honorable members. Can I continue, Chairperson?
Please proceed.
Thank you. No, thank you, honorable members. In terms of the bank controlling company, in terms of the Reserve Bank, it's what they refer to as the shareholder of reference. So it's a shareholder that basically will stand in for the banks, and they have to ensure that the bank is managed properly, the risk management policies, and are in line and in compliance with the requirements of the Reserve Bank. And also in instances whereby there might be capital requirements, is the entity that will stand good for the bank. And hence, the bank controlling company is required to be a financially stable company. and is the one that will, when the bank declares dividend, will receive the dividends, and it can decide based on the requirements, if there's any excess capital, what to pass over to its own shareholder, which in this instance will be the government. And I think the measures that are done in this is to ensure that we can almost refer to it as almost a two-step oversight on what the management does within the bank. So it is to ensure that the bank is managed adequately and properly, and I think it also does give the bank a bit of flexibility in that the holding company or the bank controlling company, as and when required, depending on how it evolves in future, it can raise capital and provide it to the bank as and when required. And if you were to refer to most of the banks in South Africa, they've got this same structure where they've got a bank controlling company. Normally, they'll refer it as a group company or the holding company that will basically own all the assets underneath. And it's an entity that if it needs to further diversify or make acquisitions, it can also do so. So hence, the importance of that. And the Reserve Bank does hold the bank holding company responsible to ensure that they keep the operating bank in line with all the banking requirements. I hope this provides a simplified overview of the bank controlling company. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Honorable members, that's in terms of responses received. Like I said, if there are legal matters, we can be advised if the state law advisor would want to speak at this point, or we then proceed accordingly. Anything from legal? I take it that then there's nothing to raise in that score. And those would have been responses received, honorable members, on our second engagement. In line with what has been raised by the committee, I can indicate that even though formal written communication of our approach to the Portfolio Committee on Finance, even at an informal level, I've used the same opportunity of the medium-term budget policy statement session to also personally raise it with the Chair of Finance. That would either get a response in writing from them, or at least agree between ourselves for a joint meeting, looking at also their tasks as the portfolio committee. So I just thought I should raise that point. I think going forward, I think would be then also guided, as I said, legally. All points have been raised, and we may also need them to also come back to respond to us, even if it's not today, and be able at some point to conclude on the discussions. Honorable Kolabanat, on what point are you rising?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if you had some sort of indication of when we could have a joint sitting with the Finance Committee. I feel as though their expertise would answer so many of the questions raised from their financial perspective. I think that would assist us enormously to have that meeting with them, in that there's this disquiet to the fact that we're even dealing with the finance bill. So I think they could assist us enormously. Do you have any indication when we could do that meeting?
Honorable Bolani.
Chairperson, this is not a question, it is just a comment. I agree with the minister to say the issue of the bank controlling company requires banking knowledge, her words. And this is just also to emphasize what Honorable Kolabana is saying, to say that while this is not a money bill, as it were, there is a need to get information from the Finance Committee. And just to note, Chairperson, that the impact assessment that was done by the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation does not necessarily speak to the establishment of the bank, but it speaks to the process flow of the bill. And the minister is right, Chairperson. If we are going to receive documents at 6 p.m. and have to come to this meeting and engage, we would have not thoroughly gone through and scrutinized the documents. Hence, we are being accused by the minister of not reading properly. So in future, Chairperson, can we get information on time, documents on time, so that we are better empowered, Chairperson? So that is the point I'm making. So the question, Chairperson, then becomes, noting that the CS, as it were, the CS is just a process flow of a bill of parliament, but not necessarily on the viability of the post bank. And what we were asking for is, how viable is the post bank? What is the feeling of this committee on that point, Chair? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Boldani. Thank you, Honorable Kolabana. I've just explained, honorable members, that interaction would have also happened. So it's a matter of us finalizing that. But I want to remind you that the decision of the committee, which should probably be captured in the minutes, is the two options. Either you have that meeting, or at least we get, like Honorable Bodlani says, a report from the finance. This actually was what she would have raised in the previous meeting. I think that's important because the primary committee tasked to deal with this structure is this committee, not the finance committee. And this has been said a number of times. But you would engage them as part of the consultation process, not because this committee outsources its responsibility to finance portfolio committee. Now I'm raising this point so that it is not a point that, no, subject to a meeting, even if finance would have responded, now would want to engage further questions with finance, therefore subject to a meeting with finance, we are unable to reflect as the committee on the matter. So I hope we have that understanding as myself and Honorable Masongai, the chair of the portfolio committee, would work on getting this meeting, or at least the report itself, because even with finance, the sense I got from him was that the prudent authority would have to be brought on board even when they come on this matter. And so far, the responses we got were such that even the prudent authority has been presented with this matter as per the responses previously. So I just thought it's important we are clearer on that, because from an ATC point of view, the referral is to this committee. We shouldn't forget that. But all these broader consultations were about enriching the discussions we have, so that at the end, when we make a recommendation, we have taken into account everything else that has been put before us, right? So I just thought let's clear that so that we move forward from that score. Of course, once there is an indication of the Honorable Kolabana, members would be communicated to in that regard. My take is that whilst we need to finalize the bill and move forward, right from public participation, the approach of the committee has been what I would say, hurry but slowly. In that, yes, there is a need to fast track the bill, but we even extended the public participation process. And we all can agree that there are benefits that have been received from that. And therefore broadening the consultation will still be about that. But that broadening of the participation also does not mean that we will stall unnecessarily so the process. So it's just about us being reasonable, but also being able to take informed decisions at the end on what we are taking forward. We do so knowingly that from a public participation process, there's generally overwhelming support for the amendment bill. And I think from inputs that are being made, my assessment is that it's not necessarily that there's objection to the amendment bill putting up a structure, but we are also caught up in what could be detailed, but also fears from lessons learned in some situations and whether this would be able to pass the test of time, especially from a point of sustainability. So we're taking all that into account in the discussion. But again, as matters would have been raised, we will also want to be sure that from a legal point of view, matters that have been raised, to what extent to the quarter on even the legality of putting up such a structure. So I'm sure you will have the same understanding there, honorable members. But there's an important point, though, that we must still come back to, that it is the problems in the South African Post Office that makes us sometimes to even think that we're still discussing separation when it was done. Because we've raised this problem before. Post Office has raised it as it's captured in the presentation, that they stand to lose once the Postbank is separated. But honorable members, we also have to balance the risk that also goes with that. If you put the Post Office with so many liabilities on their side, what it means for that Postbank if it has to be put in as a state bank that helps the poor. So we've been presented with all that. So I'm sure we'd go back, reflect again, as we would be getting even feedback from the legal, and we get to actual deliberations then on those aspects. In relation to some of the points made, I take them to be really proposals, even though you may put them as questions. There are proposals to say probably it's a matter that may need consideration, that if it becomes a fully fledged bank, is it adequate to have the concurrence of the Minister of Finance, or is it from a point of reporting something to consider for the Finance Committee, it being the bank? Right, but I'm sure as you do that, you will also understand that there are also other finance development institutions that the state has already reporting in other portfolio committees other than the finance. But it doesn't mean not entertaining any proposal that seeks to strengthen accountability and of course relevance in terms of where people should account properly. So these are discussions we may want to take as we deal with the recommendations later on when we send the bill to Parliament, which will also be an indication of not only listening to submissions, but having considered the submissions. Like I said, it's unless the state law advisor, if they're still on the platform, they would want to pick up on an issue now. Otherwise, would still expect them to maybe give proper feedback to the committee based on submissions that have been given thus far, including us refining the actual proposals and get the item back to the committee for further deliberation, of course, mindful of the need to act speedily, because I think that's what came from a number of those who presented that the bill should have long been dealt with last week. But we just thought we should not rush all the time. There'll be times where we get to be slowly in order to clarify ourselves in that regard. So that will be the way forward, honorable members, so that we do not think that the matters are finalized without us getting other views into account. This includes the report or a meeting with finance. Will consider if there are points really to be considered in that regard. But this committee is the one tasked with this task, honorable members. With that having been said, I take it that we still have an item on SETA, which has been clarified that the other report is taken for review. For that reason, it is not before us. So we'll deal with only one report in this regard. And I'm sure Mr. Shalembe, as a person responsible for entity oversight, the department will be able to indicate how they are approaching that feedback. Mr. Shalembe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. In the meeting, we have the representatives of SETA, the Deputy Chairperson, and the interim MD. They are going to take us through the presentation, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, Chairperson. Let me just switch the video on. No, it's morning, good morning. Morning, Chairperson, apologies for that. My name is Molatete. My surname is Pauwe. I'm the acting MD of SETA. I do have the deputy chair on the platform of the board. I'm not sure if you would like to say a few words before we get into the presentation itself. And I'll request the presentation be shared. Deputy Chair, before we go into the details.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members and members. I'm here. My name is Stella Voma. Thank you. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you, DC. If you could please project the presentation, Tanya. Maybe put it on presentation mode. Once again, Chairperson, good morning and morning to the honorable members and colleagues on the platform. We will be only addressing report number 113, as the minister indicated also, Chair. 114 is currently on review, and we will not be touching on that one for now. So just on the presentation, what we'll be covering is the 3 items that are indicated on the contents. We'll just give an overview of the case itself. We'll talk to the remedial actions that have been implemented to the control deficiencies that have been identified by our own process, and then were also noted by the public protector. And we'll briefly touch on the report itself on 113, what was done to date. Next slide, and just put to date. Okay, just on the overview, during the 2017-18 year, SETA itself started a process of cleanup, and the focus was to address the irregular expenditure which was there, some allegations of fraud and corruption, and the focus was on our supply chain management process and our human capital management. As part of that process, consequence management was implemented against about 55 employees of SETA that were implicated in the investigation that was carried out, which included some of the senior management team, we did provide the committee with an Annexure A, which provides a list of the disciplined officials, including the related instances, as well as procurement or the specific cases that were referenced in the report itself. So SETA and then also kept the portfolio committee, including SCOPA, to inform of those developments stemming from the 2017-18 cleanup process I referred to earlier on. And obviously the consequence management that were already implemented then. And while we're busy with that process of 17-18, the similar cases were reported to the PP, the minister of the CDP, the board, and the SETA management. Then SETA provided a report to the minister, and as part of the investigations of the Office of the Public Protector, we also provided detailed information on the work that was already underway, the consequence management that was already implemented, as well as the improvement plans that were implemented to address the control deficiencies that were identified from the process. And that's captured by the point on number 3. Though the point talked to both reports, because we had initially had 113 and 114, but we'll focus more on 113 like I indicated. You can go to the next slide. The remedial actions that have been implemented are summarized on this page. We also have an annexure B to the presentation that was also submitted to the committee, which is a letter that was written by the former MD to the public protector. And it was detailing the specific actions that have been implemented against the remedial actions that were indicated on the letter. But this slide mainly outlines the main deficiencies and the implementations that the remedial actions, and the annexure goes into a bit of more detail. What has been done, and this was part of the 17-18 cleanup process, and similar to that was the remedial actions implemented. If you look at the report of the public protector, in the report itself, they also indicate that the SETA had already implemented an action plan in which they were quite happy with what was implemented, that it should be able to address the same control deficiencies identified in the report itself. Okay. So we had restructured the structure of SETA. We also filled all the critical positions within the HCM and the HCM division. We also restructured and these are all towards the remedial actions, the composition of the bed committees, and we ensured that is capacitated with more senior members of the organization. The bed specifications, previously they were only approved by the bed specification committee. The changes that were implemented was that they will then be approved by the bed adjudication committee, and mainly to eliminate instances of the high number of cancellations that we were experiencing then, including mitigating against possible cases of fraud and corruption. All the beds that were above 10 million rand were then subjected to an audit by our own internal audit unit, and in instances where we do not have enough capacity, we'll also rope in resources from external audit firms to do the probity audits. And within the bed adjudication committee, we also had the legal risk unit, which sit in the committees and provide the necessary advice on all the items that goes through the bed adjudication committee. All the HCM officials, including all the role players, received the training, and the report on the PP provides the list of training, including but not limited to on the 333FA, on our own SCM policies, localization, that was there amongst others. And this training is ongoing, just to ensure that we are aligned to, or at least our officials are up to date with all the relevant procurement prescripts. We also revised our SCM policy to align to the latest prescripts, including development of standard operating procedures. We implemented a document management system using SharePoint. One of the remedial actions was that we should have a system in place to ensure that we are able to manage our documents. And this SharePoint achieves exactly the same, because some of the documents during the process of the investigations by the people could not be located. We also improved what we call a loss control committee. Based on the guidelines on how we deal with irregular expenditure, which are issued by National Treasury, it also introduces a loss control function. In our instance, we've got a committee which is chaired by the CFO and made up of the senior officials within SETA, including both legal, audit, and risk. And that purpose and the role of the committee is to ensure that proper consequence management is implemented against any officials that might be found wanting and or done any wrong on any of the processes related to irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. We also implemented strategies to curb the continuing irregular expenditure. One of the main contributors in terms of value was our data alliance, which have now, we have implemented the strategy, and it's just to move away from having a lot of contracts, which makes it difficult to manage, and to try and group the contracts at a provincial level. Next slide. To be more maybe specific on the remaining components, the interventions that I just alluded to will address fully what was required by the PP. What we have also done, we did include those instances in our register of fruitless and wasteful expenditure and irregular expenditure. Similarly, the cases were reported and disclosed in our financial statements. They were also brought to the attention of the Auditor General, and in most of the cases, we also followed the same guideline on irregular expenditure, which then requires you to investigate the cases and then seek all the requirements of National Treasury. Then you can take it through the condonation process. And majority of the cases, in fact, if not all of them, have gone through that process. At least they've all gone through the investigation processes, and the majority thereof were submitted either to the board, and subsequent to the change, where National Treasury was now approving irregular expenditure. They were then also taken through that process, and they were condoned by National Treasury. So we are definitely continuing on what we started in 17-18, where we improve on any gaps that we might identify within the process itself. We are continuously ensuring that our officials that are involved and all the role players within the procurement processes are receiving continuous training to obviously minimize the risk of the instances of irregular expenditure. And maybe the last point on the slide, just to confirm that consequence management, where required, was implemented, and the whole process is outlined by the applicable prescript was actually complied with. And I think this should bring us to the end of the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mega and Mr. Hawe on the SETA presentation. I would now take any member would want to comment or ask a question. on the SETA report. Honorable Podlani, you are noted. You can proceed in the meantime. Honorable
Okay.
Podlani.
I beg your pardon, Chairperson. I was battling to unmute myself.
All right.
Chairperson, the report. I think the more you hear about entities such as SETA, the more my point is confirmed that there's entities that really do fall through the cracks and entities that we really treat like stepchildren in this portfolio committee, especially when things seems to be going well. I think this is a case in point. When you are going to get a report that over the years there has been 55 employees with adverse findings against themselves. And yesterday I went through that list and you realize the first one that somebody has misrepresented their CB and their identity. People were doing business with the entity. People were watching pornographic materials on the laptops of the entity. And it seems as if we need to do more in terms of paying attention to entities such as SETA. And from what I am understanding, it seems like over the years, there has just been a lax approach in terms of management. That's why you are going to sit with a number of 55 people with ranging misconduct. So mine is to say, well, we acknowledge that the entity has received a qualified audit. More should be done to support this entity. And Chairperson, the Auditor General has recommended that more training be provided to key officials that deal with finances. The Auditor General actually recommends that a GRAB training be ongoing. How far is the department with that? And what further support does the entity require from the portfolio committee? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Podlani. May I check if there's another member who would want to make a contribution on the report before we give SETA the chance to respond to the department? Honorable Kolobanat.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, in looking through the letter and the documentation, and while I understand it took, 3 years for the Public Protector report to come through, is there in somewhere in the documentation a deadline that was set by the Public Protector in terms of when these matters all had to be dealt with? Are they working on a deadline? Is it open-ended? What is the situation? And do they have to then put together a final report that would close the matter in terms of the Public Protector's report? Thank you.
If there's no other member who would want to raise a point, let me allow the department and SETA to respond.
I can go, Chair, if you allow.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, on the timelines, there wasn't really a specific time on when we should be done with the implementation of the remedial actions. What was on the report, the requirement was that within 30 days, we were then meant to submit an action plan on the remedial action. However, those were already submitted as part of the engagements with the Public Protector. And hence on the report itself, it does indicate that it does list all the actions that were already implemented and some of the engagement that took place. So I think as far as the organization is concerned, we have complied with the requirements of the report. The other timelines that I mentioned on the report was then reporting the matters to the Auditor General and then dealing with disclosing them in our register. That was already implemented. I think it's because of the time it had taken for the PP report to be finalized. So it was sort of overtaken by events. So for all intended purposes, we have complied with all the requirements that were indicated on the report. On the question on the training on the recommendations of the Auditor General is an outcome of the last audit that was done. As part of the audit action plan, we are then implementing the plan into the training. So the training is being rolled out. Obviously, it goes beyond just the grad training, but the audit action plan is being implemented as we speak. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Omega. Shalembe.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I'm just going to touch briefly on the recommendations of the AG insofar as the training of the financial function people at SETA emanating from a qualified audit opinion. Chairperson, I can report that we monitor the implementation of, first of all, the development of the audit action plans by all our entities in the portfolio, and then we monitor the implementation thereof. On top of that, we have a structure which is convened by the DG. It's called the DG CEO Forum. That structure deals with strategic issues across the portfolio. In that structure, a decision has been taken to create a substructure of CFOs, whereby CFOs will share knowledge amongst themselves of the challenges pertaining to audit issues. And we hope that on top of the training, that sharing platform will help deal with the audit findings in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I check if there are further questions, otherwise we will then summarize. With no further questions, I take it that would have noted, members, the progress made in responding to the Public Protector report, but also noting that the other report has not served before the committee because it is taken for review. I think what's important is to also note, I think, because these concerns have been raised by Honorable Potlani a number of times, and understanding that with SETA in particular, I think coming into the 6th Parliament, this would have been the worst we had in terms of entities at the time. And this is what necessitated other interventions, including appointing a caretaker executive. And there were tasks given on repurposing SETA. And I think it is those interventions, which included oversight done by the committee, that were where we are. Unfortunately, the legacy issues in most of the entities continue to come, whether through Auditor General's reports or matters that have been dragging for some time. And understandably, some of them, once they involve labor matters, they have a tendency to take longer because of the appeal mechanism inherently in our system of government. So I think we should at least also take note of that. I think what's important is for us to be sure that as we address the legacy problems, we do not get to have repeat findings on most of the things we're assured that they are now things of the past. I think that's important. It's sad that Mr. Shelembe, your summary was high level because there was a specific question on the grab training. Because what that thing says that the efforts can be there, but if the Auditor General come to a point of saying, look, yes, you are putting every effort, but you're not in line with what is the accounting practice here, right? Now this is important for an entity like SETA that could not attract people from private sector to apply for positions at some point. And it has now capacitated itself, and we may have this problem. So surely at some point we would need that to be a piece of detail. You've capacitated, you've done everything else. What's being done to ensure that we do not get back to what the AG has raised? Then we would know we've really moved away from the past. Otherwise, we do understand that a number of things are more legacy matters in most of the entities. And we hope, as I said, there will be no repeat findings on those matters. Now, the only reason I'm raising it, honorable members, that sometimes in the midst of problems, you can even forget that you had a role to play to get it to where it is today compared to where it was at a particular time. And that's why I would have to guard jealously that it doesn't get back to that point in that regard. So that's what I thought I should raise in the summary. Otherwise, we'll still need to keep our eyes on the one that is sent for review, so that the review itself does not mean if there are glaring weaknesses identified and they existed, that we do not deal with them because the matter is taken for review. I think that's what we can ask you to take back as the entity. With that having been said, honorable members, I want to then thank the department and the entity for coming before the committee to account, as we would be dealing with the other matter, which is more of the minutes of the committee. And in that scope, we can list those that would want to be released to implement solutions that get taken from time to time, whilst we as members proceed to the next item, which Ajira will assist us with. Thank you. Well, now, minutes of the 25th. Yeah, just get slowly, bit. Okay, proceed. Unless I didn't hear anyone who would have raised any corrections on the minutes.
Chair.
It's Honorable Polani.
Chairperson, just on page 3, point number 4, bullet number 2,
that the department to provide the committee with a feasibility study indicating the costs of the new entity, new board, CEO and CFO, as well as other financial implications of setting up the bank. I think that should really, that's something that should have come through again today, but maybe we should, when we do the minutes of this meeting, please carry that item forward. Thanks, Chairperson. With that, I so move.
Honorable Bolani moves. I get
Chair, my hand is up.
that. Honorable Barnett, you are on corrections.
Yes, I actually want, oddly enough, I wanted to raise exactly that. I think if it's in our minutes, it doesn't necessarily mean the department's going to read our minutes. So I think that resolution would have to be put into a formal letter to the department so that they could prepare the entire costing and layout for us. This was something I actually asked the minister where I could find such finances, and unfortunately it was not answered. So just with that pointer, and I absolutely agree, the minutes are fine and I would second them. Thank you.
Okay, so that's not a correction, it's emphasis.
Indeed.
Because once the minutes are approved as true reflection of our deliberations, then the effect thereof. Because remember, you could change what is put in the minutes basis that is not captured properly, and it will change then the content. So the minutes are agreed to and will indicate as such, right? Again, as I close the session, because it's also in the minutes right at the end. As I close the session, we still are hopeful that the 6 that's remaining on those that need to be vetted could still be received this week. Otherwise, we're standing at 6 short for board candidates for the SABC. So as I say, we remain hopeful that the interventions that are being made could result in the remaining 6 to be presented to us. The last time we got feedback was last week on Thursday for the other people that have been vetted. With that having been said, of course, I would want to still encourage members, honorable members, that when we get to the committee, we should still remember every contribution made by a member is valued by this committee. This includes from the point of chairing that I value those contributions. Of course, from time to time, we may not come the same way in raising matters, but it doesn't mean that no contribution, your contribution is not taken seriously. The success of the committee over time has been the parties working together as members of parliament, putting the people of the country first, and put our political heads out of the house and be able to look at things from a point of being public representatives. We want to encourage that we keep that spirit, because there will be difficult matters that come before the committee. And of course, will differ from the different parties where we come from a point of orientation. But at the end, we'll still have to find common ground as representatives of the people, that decisions we make have a direct impact on the lives of our people. And it's history that will make a judgment whether, as we do that, history will indeed grant us that we did it in the best interest of the people, or we acted probably in other interests that do not benefit people in general. So I thought we should close with that in mind. It's very helpful as we'll be approaching other matters that will be coming before the committee, which would need us to find common ground as members of parliament. With that, thanks, honorable members. The meeting stays adjourned till we meet again.